Glad you came. Actually,
Where do you want me, right?
maybe you sit here. Right here.
Sit here? Okay.
My wife.
Right. I'm lost.
We're going to give away a few prizes too. Make sure everybody's got a ticket. Does everybody have a ticket? Anybody have a ticket? Let me know. Raise your hand and we'll make sure you do. Everybody's got a ticket. Half of one anyway, not both parts of it. Okay, acknowledge the folks that are here before we let Ashley take the floor, and then we will be able to mill around a little bit. We're going to have a drawing too.
Is the person give a prize? You don't like it? Okay. I don't have a clue what a prize is.
Represented by Susan Aiken. Susan, I lost track of her. But yeah, Susan's right here. Okay. Yes. For probate judge, Dan Sharp is here. As you know, he announced. There he is, standing right in front of me, and big as that, I don't know how in the world I missed it. He should have wore white. Representative Ann Thayer is here. Chamber system.
I guess he's not.
Jonathan Hill, running for South Carolina House District 8 against Don Bowen. There's Jonathan to my left here. I lost him. Okay. Greg Gagnon is here, Representative District 11, right here, near the front table. Denny Floyd is here, candidate for District 5 County Council. And, of course, I mentioned Bob Walter, who's walking around here.
I'll be speaking after a while.
Anybody else that I missed?
All right, now you're back up.
Jackie Hunter. Why can't we sign the list? No wonder I missed it. You don't work for the auditor's office, do you? Jackie Hunter, county auditor, is here. Frank Alexander's walking around here with a calendar, and who taking your picture and all that stuff. Jason Watkins is walking around here with a video camera. That's a bit more dangerous. But that will be up on our website, by the way, probably by tomorrow. That's why by tomorrow. But it's cutting in code and all that.
We done?
But you will see most of it happening. Those people that did not grace us with their presence will have an opportunity to see it anyway. And those that decided not to come were really charged for looking at it. Fair enough? Stephen Duncan is here with Anderson Ford Mazda. He's over the service department. You've heard me talking about him from time to time. And Ray Wardlaw is with him, and the other gentleman is also employed there.
Oh, just read it.
Adjust the microphone.
I don't need one.
Not used to that.
Yeah. Okay, how's that? How's that? Can everybody hear me? Yeah? Okay. Again, I don't really need a microphone, but I'm going to use it anyway because it's important to me. Wow, what a crowd. I love Anderson County. And first of all, I want to thank this guy. Right here, he doesn't stop. You know, and I'm just going to say this, it's easier for some of the big national talk radio folks to go on and do what they do. It's easy, believe it or not, as a talk radio host, to go after President Obama. He's got a whole bunch of us here right behind him. But you know what's hard? Is to take on the South Carolina ruling elite.
Amen.
That is a harder thing to do. Takes a lot of guts, because right down here in your own backyard, the pressure is real to shut this guy up. All I can say is I have every confidence that they are not going to win that battle. But you all need to help us. You got to make sure that Rick doesn't have the pressure around him all the time because you're the ones who have his back. You're the reason he does what he does. And I'm very grateful to Rick Driver because you've done a whole lot to promote what we do at the Policy Council up here in Anderson. And it's important. So, what is the Policy Council? Before I do that, I want to introduce one more person. This man right here. Do you all know Harry Kibler? You know this guy? Stand up, Harry. Let me get a look at you. Okay. The reason I point to Harry Kibler is because Harry runs a little organization called the Rhino Hunt. And he does a little talking of his own on Saturdays up here on WORD. And the thing about Harry is this. When we first started working together, I realized something. Wow, this guy's not afraid of politicians. Not only is he not afraid to take them on, challenge them, one-on-one or as a group, but I think he kind of likes it. So that's an example of one of the grassroots activists who has a full-time job and a lot of other things to do, but who once told me, I don't want to do this. I don't want to be in politics every day. I want to get back on my boat. And I think that's what we're all here for. Because truly, we all just want to get back to what we're doing. I think most people would love to believe that if we just elect the right person, it's all going to be better. But in South Carolina, we've got a bigger problem than the wrong people in office. We got a really big problem, and I'm going to get to that. First, what is the Policy Council? Well, the Policy Council is a think tank. And I can hear you saying to yourself, and exactly what do you do? Well, let me boil it down for you. Our job is to identify barriers to freedom and empower you to tear them down. Just that simple. We have a vision for South Carolina to make it the freest state in America. That is what we want for our state. Right there. Now, can you just let that wash over me for a second? Instead of hearing it, it sounds good. But I want you to think about what it would actually feel like to live in the freest state in America. To live in the state, not where politicians do the best job of creating jobs. They don't. But rather, where there is the most equal opportunity to prosper. The most opportunity to prosper. Now, what do we need to do to get there? It's time to set that bar high. We want to be independent, the most independent state in America. And what I mean by that is independent from Washington's heavy hand. Independent, how about this? Do you want to live in the first debt-free state in America? That's the first thing that we realize. We've got to start setting actual goals. And we need to set the bar high. Now, I'm going to tell you something. Politicians cannot design the right education system for you. Neither can I. Nor can I design a healthcare system. Neither can anyone in this room. But we could live in the state in which there is the most choice available through the freest market for all goods and services. Tear down the barriers to competition, and you have excellence, right? So that's what we're shooting for. So in aiming high, we sort of came into some problems. And it was this. First of all, we all tend to think of government as a giant energy orb, right? Well, government can do this. Well, that's what government ought to do. Government should have a role in the economy. Government should have a role in designing an education system and a healthcare system. But you know what it really comes down to? Government is politicians. So either a politician is going to design your healthcare plan, or you and your doctor get to design your healthcare plan. There is no third option there. It's about that transaction. So trying to make people understand, listen, you've got some great representation in Columbia, right here in Anderson. And I don't say that very often, to be honest with you. But you do here, you have people. Senator Kevin Bryant deserves a great deal of credit. And I hope that's right. And I know you have some good representatives here. I talked with Craig and Ann. But see, the job description they have is the one we give them. Because we've all lost sight of the what it should be. So should the role of politicians be to go to Columbia and figure out how they can design a good economy? I mean, think about that a minute. Do you think that they should have it as their goal to create jobs?
No.
Does anybody, do we all kind of agree, yes or no?
Yeah.
This is a really important one, because this is the stuff we're going to have to decide. The way it is today, our politicians actually do believe that you want them to fix the economy. Now, how are they going to do that? Well, there's really only one way, and that is for them to get out of the way and allow the free market to work, to unleash capitalism. And I don't mean just a little bit either. But instead, politicians seem to think that you are judging their performance based on how many jobs our governor announces. Now, here's the problem with that. Number one, we have no idea how this turns out for the rest of us, because it's all done in secrecy. But, you know, by wanting these people to fix schools and fix education and feed the poor for us, we're taking all of that responsibility off of ourselves. So, I guess what I would say, the first thing we want to bring on into terms is that we, the people, are fairly responsible for the system of government that we've ended up with. So that's kind of what I want to go through a little bit. And Rick, jump in any time that I need to shift gears or these guys need a break, because I'm kind of scary when I'm on a roll.
You just go right ahead and we'll, if we have a Q&A period.
Oh, we're going to. More than that than anything.
You know, then let me know, and anybody has a question of Ashley or whatever else we're going to. Maybe something unrelated to what she's talked about. By the way, Cindy Wilson just walked in. County Council. I don't think I missed anybody else, but anybody speaking I didn't see? I don't think so. Okay. Well, actually, go right ahead.
All right. So I'm going to talk to you a little today. I'm going to boil this down. Now, I know you're used to blunt talk in Anderson County, because I wouldn't call Rick Driver much of a sugarcoater, would you? No one does. No one calls me that either anymore. But I guess I want to tell you, first of all, that I am not a radical. I'm not a radical. This is how I am portrayed, and I say I don't, it's the whole movement, really. But these guys in the State House are pretty mad at us. And I'm going to talk about that in a minute. But I intend to. But you know, they're painting us, people like me and Rick Driver and Harry Kibler, as radical extremists in comparison to the reasonable mainstream Republicans, real conservatives. We're the nut jobs. So before we go any further, I want to tell you what I believe and what the Policy Council stands for, and I'll take ownership of what we believe. Number one, limited government, free enterprise, individual liberty and responsibility. Is that a radical mission? Okay. Is it a radical idea to say that all children, if we're going to have a public education system, that all children deserve access to whatever school is best for that child? Yes. Okay, now are you sure that's not crazy, nutty? All right. So here's another really crazy one. We believe that taxes ought to be low across the board for everyone, not just one or two corporations. Equal taxation. Equal taxation. All right. Now remember, you've got your county council, you've got some good folks from the State House. I wanted to make sure that they understood, and I understood, that that's what you believe. Okay, fair taxes across the board. Lower taxes for everyone. A cap on government spending. Yeah. Anyone? Okay, now, by the way, those are the core principles of the South Carolina Policy Council, and the ones that we fought for 10 years, when I came anyway. And you know what? I gotta tell you something, folks. They're not going to give any of that to you. Your taxes are not lower. They are higher. Your income tax, 14th highest in the nation. Sales tax is at the 16th highest. Of course, the leadership in the House, well, let's just be honest, the Speaker of the House, and we will get to that in a minute too. Speaker of the House sent out a big press release saying we have the lowest state taxes in the nation.
Why?
Yeah, he did.
Why?
Spoken. And the first year he did it, we said, oh, there's a misunderstanding. The chart he was quoting actually showed the lowest collections. The lowest state tax collections, not the lowest rates. But there's a big difference between what you charge and what you collect, right? So we brought it up and said, hey, you know what? That's not quite right. Well, you know what? He did it again the next year. The stuff they're telling you, how do I put this delicately, is not always entirely accurate. Folks, we increasingly are the least free state in the country. So when we realized that the budget was getting bigger, government was growing, all of the people we thought were the most conservative were raising taxes and user fees and talking about raising taxes. By the way, FYI, a gasoline tax is not a user fee. Okay? It's a tax. It is a tax on a privately made good. It's not a user fee. A user fee is what you pay to go into the park. Big difference. Here's where we are. We've realized over the last few years that not only are our taxes going up, but our state budget is divided into 3 pots. And the total is about $24 billion. Now, legislators argued at the time we released this report, no, you see, here's the problem. That other money, that's federal money. So that doesn't count. Okay? Then they threw out, those other funds? Oh, no, those are just fees. You know, that we charge to businesses for the privilege of operating their business. That doesn't count. We don't debate those. All we debate is that little $6 billion figure over there. The smallest of the pots of money. Now, I'm going to tell you something that is very critical to everything that you're angry about coming down from Washington. Don't shake your fist up at D.C. while your lawmakers are opening their palms to take the money. Okay? That's what we're going here. Now, look. Most rank and file House members and senators don't even get to see the budget while it's being written behind closed doors by the leadership. And that's a fact. But folks, it is not true, as they have said, that we are standing up to Obamacare. We are implementing Obamacare even as we speak in South Carolina. Okay? That's happening. We're not having a discussion about whether it's good or bad anymore. For the people it affects, the taxpayers, and those who use the service. They're not getting quality health care, and it's the most expensive medical plan. We're all paying for it. Nothing good is coming out of this. And yet we are increasing our spending on Medicaid and increasing our request of federal dollars. That's happening in the state budget. I'm going to tell you something revolutionary. Your state lawmakers, your governor, most certainly can and should turn down federal dollars because that's where the mandates come. All that federal spending, think of it this way, it's kind of like a contractual relationship between state officials and DC officials. Problem is, you don't get a say in it. You have no idea what they're voting on, and most of the time, neither do they. So you see how it's not going to stop, is what I'm telling you. If we just keep doing what we've been doing, it's not going to stop. What's going to tear this mess down? When you know that everything we've asked for the last 16 years that I've been in the South Carolina Policy Council, they have not given us. Have they lowered your taxes? No, they have not. Okay. Have they implemented an across-the-board school choice program? Have we gotten that yet? Hasn't happened. Okay. A cap on spending. Have they done that? No. Okay. All right. Let's see. What other big ideas? What other good conservative reforms have we wanted?
Register by party. We ain't got that.
I know there are a lot of folks who want that, yes, to register by party. And of course, we at the Policy Council don't get in the middle of your parties. Don't think anyone else should either, by the way. But yes, that's something else that many of you have wanted your conservative legislature to do for you. Any of that happening? In fact, is there anything that you can think of to make the economy better, to make our state more free, better schools, anything you can think of that they've actually done?
About recall.
Haven't done that? I don't know. Listen, we ain't close to that. But no, they haven't done that. In other words, if you're sitting here, you're in Anderson County, and you're realizing that not a single conservative reform that you wanted has in fact been given to you by this so-called conservative administration/legislature.
Constitutional carry.
That's right. Second Amendment. Do you know that we have the weakest Second Amendment laws in the South? Yes, we do. And in fact, I think we were only one of 2 states that had a CWP that wouldn't let you carry it in a restaurant. Now, thanks to Talbot Black, Palmetto Gun Rights, Herod Kibler, and some others, they did do that. So that was a victory. You may now carry your weapon in a restaurant that serves alcohol.
How about Act 385? That didn't happen.
Act 385 was a mess. It's still a mess. And they've still raised your taxes.
They raised taxes, but was it not supposed to lower our
Of
prices?
course it was. Yes, it was. Of course that's what it was supposed to do. But the thing is, there hasn't been a tax cut across the board in South Carolina that has not also had a corresponding tax increase. You know, revenue neutrality. Yeah, that doesn't equal a tax cut, folks. So you see, What I'm trying to show you is something you already know. It is very difficult for us, because we're nice people. Well, I'm not, but most of you are. You know, I used to be a nice person, by the way. It's hard to realize what this boils down to for you and what we have to do together to take back our state. Because the number one problem in South Carolina that has to be solved before you will get anything else you care about done. Nothing you care about is going to happen in South Carolina until we restore an American Republic-style government. Period. South Carolina has the highest degree of concentration of power and secrecy in the nation. So, recipe for corruption, concentration of power, secrecy. Anybody in here, raise your hand if you can think of an example throughout history. I mean anything. Where a government had a high level of secrecy and power was concentrated in the hands of a few people for whom you couldn't vote. Tell me an example of where that's worked out for us. Okay.
County.
Come on.
Our own county in Richmond.
Right, well you guys tore that down, but I'm saying, how has it been good for us to have concentration of power and secrecy in government? When does that ever lead to anything but tyranny and corruption? So you see, we're not really crazy. We're pretty awake right now. As for what you do to fix it, mind. All right, we'll talk about that in a second. A little water. Okay. So, I guess you wouldn't be in the room if you didn't want to stop this stuff. I believe that you would be doing something else on a Saturday if you did not believe and had not concluded that we have to come together and do something about this. And I'll say it again, you all have concluded that it is your responsibility to do something about this. So you're here because you believe it is up to you. You know it is. You understand that we cannot elect someone to fix this mess for us? We can, however, and should elect people who have a clear core governing philosophy and believe their only role is to protect your right to life and liberty and pursuit of happiness and your property. That's it. That's it. So, what are we going to do about the fact that we have the most corrupt government structure in America, which has bred the most, and I'll put it out there, corrupt politicians? And yes, we do have corruption. It is systemic in Colombia. It is worse than it is anywhere else in this country. And that is not my opinion. That's driven by the research that we've done at the Policy Council over the last 5-6 years. There's a reason for that. But it is indisputably true. Here's part of the problem with our corruption. I'll tell you the difference between two differences. Actually, it's all one. The difference between corruption in South Carolina and, say, Illinois, Louisiana, New York. It's illegal in most states. What we have in South Carolina is legal corruption. Most of what they do, they've made the laws, right, so that they're protected. Now that's a fact. I can give you so many examples of that, but here's one just to think about. Why is it that here in South Carolina, we're even having a discussion in the legislature about pushing back against Obamacare? Why are we even having a fight over it? Didn't they all campaign on stopping this? So why are we even debating this? You know, it's kind of one of your first clues. When you start hearing the Republicans say, well, we can't just say no to the money. So we're going to put a bill together that doesn't really do it, but actually it does. You know we're not winning. We're not winning. So I think if you really dig a little deeper, what you will see is core problem number one. Speaker of the House owns a pharmaceutical repackaging company. I wonder if more Medicaid money coming into the states would be a good thing for someone in a business like that. Another legislator owns and sells medical equipment on the side. Made quite a bit of money selling medical equipment to the state. Medicaid money. Okay? Now, here's the problem with it. Number one, perfectly legal. You know why? Because right now, South Carolina lawmakers do not have to disclose their sources of income. You have no idea if there are conflicts of interest in our state house. You have no idea. That's right, really. They disclose only that income they've earned from the state of South Carolina. I'm not sure my mind is around the fact that they earn income from the state of South Carolina, but so many of them do. But they don't have to tell you who pays them. So when you see a push to opt into Medicaid expansion, you have to begin to wonder if they're representing your interests or their own. That's one of the barriers that we have to tear down. In fact, there are 7. So, shouldn't lawmakers have to disclose their sources of income? So you're there on that. Okay, you understand this isn't just a small transparency measure, right? This cuts to the core of why you don't have lower taxes and a cap on spending. And every year, the state budget is larger than the previous year. Every year, they pass the largest state budget in history. Speaking of the budget, here's another one of our core reforms. It seems that by state law, go figure, the governor is supposed to write the budget, and 5 days later, there are supposed to be these hearings held. Open hearings held. Joint hearings between the House Ways and Means Committee and the Senate Finance Committee. And you know what they're supposed to do? Well, it's not write the budget based on where they want to hide the dollars. See, that's not their directive, actually. Rather, they are supposed to debate the governor's budget. The chief executive officer submits the budget, and these legislators address that budget. Now, they can change it any way they want, but I want you to stop and think what a different game it would be if the governor had to take full responsibility for every dime of spending that he or she wanted to bring in the state and do it publicly in front of you. And if those 2 committees that right now draft budgets in secret had to sit there and face you and go through all of those line items in that budget and vote on them, don't you think it'd be a whole different ballgame? I promise you, you would know when they triggered Obamacare in South Carolina, you would know it. And you would have an opportunity to stop it if they followed state law. But you know what? Leadership doesn't want to do that. And when we've asked about that, and when people like Harry Kibler have asked about that, the answer is, yeah, that's an old law. Well, so is thou shalt not kill. But I think it's still pretty much on the books. And then when we pushed back even harder, and some of you got really angry about it and said, wait a minute, I want to know what's in that budget. Well, the response there from the Senate Judiciary Chairman, who's just up the road a piece, up there in Pickens, said, well, who's going to make us? So, there is a process by which you could hold politicians accountable for taking federal dollars, triggering mandates, raising fees on small businesses. There is a way to stop it. It's already a state law, but they will not follow the law. Who's going to make them do it? Only you can. Only you can. What about the fact that the legislature exempts itself from the Freedom of Information Act? Wrap your mind around that. Just you know, some of these just get me every time I say them out loud. So, the Freedom of Information Act applies across the board. It's supposed to apply to any entity that receives or spends a public dollar. All right? Again, pretty clear. Well, the legislature decided that there ought to, of course, be exceptions to that, involving whatever they do. So in South Carolina, your legislature does not have to comply with the Freedom of Information Act regarding their correspondence, their papers. They don't have to tell you. Think that's a problem? Now you're starting to see it. All these big corporate welfare deals, huge incentive deals. Not just tax breaks for these big corporations that small businesses do not get, but actual cash. We recently borrowed $120 million, borrowed money, bond debt, so that a multi-billion-dollar corporation wouldn't have to spend its own capital to expand. That debt is on your back and the backs of your children and grandchildren. No discussion, just pushed it on through. So think about that a minute. Our attitude about these incentive deals is this. If you're going to make us investors in a company, you better open up the door, and I want to see what my investment is. That means every company that wants a tax break has to do so in the open. That means what's the cost benefit? I want to see some serious due diligence. I mean, look, those of you who have brokers who handle your investments, right? What if that guy or gal, what if your broker did this? Rick, I got a deal for you. I got a great investment. It's going to do a lot for you. You're really going to be proud. Oh man, I worked hard to bring this one. And you really need to give me a lot of credit for it. But here's the thing about this investment. I'm going to need you to write me a check. So Rick says, well, what's the investment? Oh yeah, Rick, I can't tell you that. It's a secret right now. So Rick says, well, how much money do you need? Yeah, you know, Rick, the best way to do this, just give me a blank check. Because we're going to, you know, we're not sure right now how much all this is going to cost us. And then, you know, Rick's over there and he's got 5 or 6 of his friends. And the guy turns to them and says, oh, and every one of you needs to give me a check too. Now, Rick's the only guy who might get anything back from it. You're okay with that, right? All the rest of you? In all seriousness, how many of you would give that guy a check? Well, you do it every day. You give a check like that to your governor, to the Speaker of the House, to the Senate Finance Chairman, and they negotiate these deals. And it's right, and at the county level, it's coming around strong, because once they finish doling it out at the state level, they want to come back down here and get a little more out of you. But they won't tell you how much, how the money's spent. You know, you have no idea how many actual jobs have been created. You don't know that, because they will not tell you. Now, we've tried to get those numbers, just to say, look, let's just be honest with the people about what's really happening. Make this deal in public. Let us have some ownership and some input and some information, and we'll decide. At the very least, though, we have a right to know how many of these thousands of jobs went to South Carolinians, don't you think? So that's something that's got to be dealt with. There are so many problems, and they really stem from the structure of government. Now, how about if the legislature, wait for it, only had to meet for, say, 2 months? And what if they met every other year for 2 months? Do you believe more people would run for office?
Yep.
Right. Okay. Here are a couple of really big ones. Now, this may be one of the biggest problems in the state and in the country. So, bear with me on this one. The reason that we have so much concentration of power and secrecy, the reason our state is one of the poorest and always has been, at least for the last several decades, the reason you cannot stop these people is because power is in the hands of about 3 legislators, and they're the ones running your state, not your governor. You cannot vote for House Speaker Bobby Harrell, and yet Bobby Harrell chooses half of the members of a screening committee that picks your judges. One politician. The Senate has the other half split between 2 people. But half of those people, Bobby Harrell appoints half of the screening committee. And by the way, one of the appointees is his brother. And you know, that's one of the allegations in the complaint we filed. And do you know that to this day, no one has stood up to answer the question of whether that's legal when the law seems to say so clearly that it's not. It's not legal. But he did it anyway. And no one has stood up to at least restore some trust in our judicial system. So when you have that, and then you have, you know how you get to be a judge in South Carolina? How many of you know? I mean, you really know how that process works. A couple of you? Okay, here's what it is. You want to be a judge? You go before this screening committee. They pick you out. On the right day, here's what you do. You put on a name tag, and you go down to not the lobby of the State House. No, they're not in the lobby. Come on. They're in a parking garage. So here's your image. Your judges huddled in a dark parking garage, asking legislators to vote for them. Yeah? That's right, folks. That's your government. And guess what? They do not do it that way in the other 49 states. So what should happen? The governor ought to appoint the judges with advice and consent of the Senate. That's the check and the balance. That's the way our founders envisioned the republic. We ought to do it that way in South Carolina. And we're seeing a lot of reasons why that's important. In addition, and here's one that people feel iffy about this, but folks, the governor you elect should be the one to run state government. Should we have a bunch of different people responsible for state government? Should we have 100 boards and commissions that run state government? Boards appointed by legislators in many cases? Do you see why our system is such a mess? Now I know you're thinking to yourself, this is so much information. But you know what? It's still pretty simple. Separation of powers and full transparency. Start there and you can live in the freest state in America. I promise you. But the battle that you have to getting there is going to be a real pain. So, now I want to talk for just a minute. Now, first of all, maybe I can answer some questions for a little while. You want to do that for a little bit? All right, to answer some questions for a little bit. All right. Yes. I'll let Rick pick the question first. He's better at that.
Tennessee doesn't have a state income tax. And Tennessee does not have a state income tax, and there are other states. I'm wondering if we were able to do away with income tax, and what we replace it, and how do you see the states that have no income tax? What does that do for economic development? Is that a good idea?
It's a great idea, but they're not going to do it. They're not going to do it. Your conservative lawmakers are not going to eliminate the income tax. And in fact, your governor has proposed eliminating one bracket, the 6% bracket. But the income tax kicks in on the high 7% at only about $13,000 of income. So how much good do you think this is going to do? Right, $80 a year maybe for some people. So there's no move anymore to cut taxes, unfortunately. Yes, sir?
Everything you said this morning is extremely interesting. Could you put all of this in print form, send it to Rick Driver, and let him pick parts of it each day? It takes about 10 minutes, because he loves to read on his radio.
And Rick Driver, you should have the 8 points of reform, the 8 barriers to freedom.
But anyway, would you do that?
I'll make sure he's got it. But this idea, these 8 barriers to freedom, pull the power plug,
For one who can.
that's what we've been talking about for the last 2 years.
Got another one.
Who else? Talk to me.
I mean, Dan, you, no. Wait a minute.
Actually, I want to ask you about this. Now that we're getting down to the wire with the Obamacare deadline,
Right.
I've had about 5 or 6 people in the last 2 weeks, because they know I'm involved with the Republican Party. They're actually angry at the Republican Party for not, in their view, they're angry at the Republican Party, the State House, for not taking the Medicaid money, because they think that's harming them getting what they need. So would you explain the ramifications of not taking the money, what it would have meant if we had taken the money?
All right, I will, but first of all, I've got to set the record straight. We are expanding Medicaid already in South Carolina. Yes. We're expanding it under current eligibility rates, but we're already doing it. The one thing we've said no to, publicly anyway, is we're not going to opt into Medicaid expansion. But Dan, what I'll tell you is they are doing everything they can to backdoor that. So the Republicans in the State House, for the most part, are not doing anything to stop the expansion of Medicaid. But the ramifications of taking that money, we know, will be, it's a continuation of something we already know is bankrupting the country and bankrupting the state. There's no doubt about that.
I just wanted to ask about the grant money that was given out to so many people. And
Good.
It's not asked, nobody even has to answer for what they do with it or where it goes. Who is responsible for doing that?
Who is responsible for, you mean requesting federal government grants and state government
They
grants?
have to give an account of where this money goes.
Oh, right, no, they're supposed to. Why don't they? Well, here's the thing. In that budget process, because everybody passes the buck, Gene, it's a pass the buck game. It's pass the buck. So, what they do is, in the budget, they don't pay attention to it. They do this blanket authority that they let state agencies just apply for grants. So state agencies do it, it rolls in, and nobody's paying attention to it. You've got to have that authority. Those grants, any federal grant ought to be voted up or down as an appropriation function in the legislature, so you know. So you know. Yes?
Okay, I have 2. Okay, sorry about that.
Okay,
I'll just give 2 at the same time. I want to know what your opinion is on Common Core and on the flood insurance issues right now, because we have people down on the coast that have gone from $567 on flood insurance up to $6,700 a month, not a month, but a year, and they're having to sell their homes and lose their homes. Now, we did work very diligently, Washington 4 years in a row, trying to get that stabilized, and they did give us a little bit of an extension, but if you inherit a piece of property on the ocean or somewhere that's going to be in flood, there's no way you can pay that kind of insurance, and people are losing their homes for that. And, you know, it's just, I think people ought to know about it. But I want to ask you about those two things. Thank you.
Okay.
You were there?
Number one, Common Core. We've actually done a great bit of research at the Policy Council on Common Core. And our contention is, in a nutshell, it's terrible. In another nutshell, they've already implemented it. Okay? So you have those two problems. Number three, I'm going to tell you the same thing about Common Core that I told you about Obamacare. It won't come through a sweeping piece of legislation that says we're not going to do Common Core. Because as long as you're taking the federal money, you have no choice. Folks, we don't have sovereignty as a state when we relinquish it for federal grant money. We give up our sovereignty. Our public officials give up that sovereignty. Do that, you've signed the contract. You've got to get back to the dollars. As for the flood insurance, I know that's a complicated issue, but I'm going to say this. What we've done to the insurance companies as a whole, by forcing them to insure this, forcing them to insure that, more and more and more, government is telling insurance companies what they have to pay for. It's becoming prohibitive. Rates are rising all over the place. We've killed the free market. And in so doing, we've made it impossible for, let's say, a small boutique insurance company to open up in the state. And you know, you live on the coast, it's going to cost you more, okay? But if they start subsidizing the insurance for folks on the coast, everyone up here is going to have to pay more.
And in redrawing the flood maps, a lot of people, even here, are winding up in a flood zone when they bought the house. They weren't in the flood zone, and it's just
right.
It is costing. I mean, it's shutting our real estate down,
and that's a problem.
That's a real big problem.
We've got to remove the barriers to the free market being able to sell these products. Right now, they can't. There aren't enough of them. There will.
Okay. We're running out of time here.
I'm gonna be quick. I know. But the other problem that we're having, and I know you're tired of hearing about it, and everybody else is too. But you know, you go across the state line, not 3 miles from right here, and you can buy a second home for 4%. You in Anderson County, you're gonna be 6%. Right. When we're out trying to do business and trying to get investors to do things, they're going across the state line. They're not staying here. Well, that money's going across the state line.
I don't blame them. You know what? And do you blame them? No. But why won't they cut the taxes? And I'll tell you something else. They won't fix the infrastructure either.
No, they won't.
They won't.
What they tell us, if we go to Washington, what they tell us is, well, that's got to be done on the county and state level.
Yes.
So then, going back to Plunder, what they tell us is you got to talk to your county. When we go to county, they tell us that the state level.
Okay, let me answer the question for you so you don't have to worry about it. 90-something% of the roads in South Carolina are in the hands of the state government in South Carolina. It is they who are responsible for it. And number two, they have borrowed. They have spent out of that the infrastructure bank. You guys familiar with the state infrastructure bank? Well, that's how they funnel your transportation dollars that you send to Columbia into a bank where they borrow it at 10 times. They've spent $4 billion out of that infrastructure bank. And you know what? The money's gone to 6 counties.
Austin won.
6 counties. $4 billion of your road money. You're in debt for it. It's gone to 6 counties. One of which is Charleston, then you got Florence County. Are these things sounding familiar to you? Basically, legislative leaders control the bank, and they get the money for their projects, and you don't. So that's a real simple fix right there. Let's get rid of the infrastructure bank. How about that? Let's put the governor in charge
Ray Moore here again. I want a question, a short answer. You give us about 8 problems. What are the 2 top things we could correct? 2 things that might cascade over and influence the total package. What are 1 or 2 things that we could do that might change the course? What are the 8?
You know, I wish I could tell you one of the 8 was more important than the other, but they are all important. So as they come up, Ray, as we catch these things and as we can build momentum, for example, we're about to possibly get that income disclosure passed. That might pass. If it does, it's one of the 8. But in the meantime, you know what we're doing? We're asking you to ask your lawmakers to disclose their income voluntarily to you. And I'll wrap it up with that in a minute, but that's the call to action.
Okay, one more.
Could you get Rick a copy of the infrastructure money and how much each county gets?
Sure.
Give to him?
Sure. You bet.
Yep.
It's kind of an eye-opener, isn't it, folks?
The nerve.org is one place you probably need to look at, and the scpolicycouncil.org as well if you want to find out more. And Ashley will be sticking around a little bit, I assume, here in the next few moments. And of course, all the other candidates, by the way, probate judge Martha Newton has come in during the interim here. We were talking, you're late, and we will write you up for that. But that's all. And Ashley will be around. Of course, I know everybody is full of fish and everything else that you consume, and I'm glad you came. And does anybody else have anything that they would like to have Ashley publicly?
Go ahead.
Open?
You mentioned on Rick's show Thursday, I believe, that go to scpolicy.org and go somewhere, and I didn't write that down because I was in the car.
Was it the nerve?
Okay, it was probably the conflict watch.
Yeah.
And that's a call to action I'm going to ask each of you to take charge of. You know, it's got to be our turn out here to take charge of this. We can't do it by ourselves. We need everyone to participate. And here's an easy way to do it. scpolicycouncil.org. Get on there and you'll see Conflict Watch. Ask your lawmakers and your governor and your constitutional officers to disclose their income sources to you. You have a right to know who pays these people. So, let them hear from you. Let them hear from you. I promise you, it's important. I know Ann says she's turned hers in already. Craig promised me today that he would do so. It matters, and then we can help you watch for conflicts of interest. So that's one of the ways we're doing it until they get around to passing the law. We're not waiting for them to do that.
I'm also on the ethics committee that's coming back to that, so we're certainly going to try and put that back in. I doubt it'll pass through the Senate, but you know, they sent the bill back. Did they leave in the income disclosure?
Yeah. They did, actually.
No.
Yeah, I think you did.
I haven't seen it yet.
You need to pass one.
Yeah, I hear it's a mess, but anyway, what about convention of states? We have that subcommittee hearing on Thursday, and I know there's a lot of mixed.
What about what? Okay, all right. They're going to be mad at me, but I will answer. People going to be mad at me, right? Will you protect me? Okay, here's where we are on that. Convening, the states, focusing on demanding what? That Washington do what? Have a balanced budget. We have a balanced budget in law in South Carolina. We don't have a balanced budget. We're billions of dollars in debt. So, in all honesty, I'm going to tell you what I believe that is. Well-meaning, sure, by some. But folks, everyone wants you to concentrate your energy on Washington. I want you to concentrate it on Columbia. We don't need... this is the way that some, not all, but some, want to deflect your attention. So what are they asking you to do? Go to your state legislator and tell your state legislator to appoint some people to go to Washington to tell them to do something. Tell them yourself and then get back to telling your state lawmakers what their duties are as your duly elected representatives. It's as simple as that, right?
Ashley, all politics are local, so I'm going to ask you a local question. the Supreme Court remanded a case to a judge, and it's been over a year and he's not done a thing to take up that case. We have locally a member of our county council who regularly attends meetings that she ought to be excluded from because she has a vested interest in them. So before we get to Columbia, I think we need to clean up Anderson.
You do indeed. Kind of, as quickly as possible, you got to get it, the county and the state, you got to do both. And one other thing I'll say, because I know I didn't get to this, but I will be happy to talk about it afterwards. We did file a criminal complaint against the Speaker of the House. I think you all know that. And you know what? It was not an easy decision on my part. I didn't want to be the one to do it, especially because at the time I thought I might have to take it before the House Ethics Committee. And if I had done that, they would have had a gag order, they would have had subpoena power, and pretty much anything they wanted. But I thought we were going to have to do that because our Attorney General would not take the case. Everyone thinks this was cooked up. Yeah. Alan Wilson said, no, I will not take that. I will not investigate that until it goes through the process, like it or not. So we prepared that complaint to go through the process of the House Ethics Committee to hold the Speaker accountable. But you know what we discovered? We discovered true constitutional due process problems. That complaint would have been investigated by staff members who reported to the Speaker. His appeal would have been controlled by himself. If he had wanted to hire an independent investigator, only he could have signed off and paid the guy. So you see, and even finally, we had witnesses on that list who would have been accountable to the Speaker. Now you tell me that that is an American justice process. It's not. And when we expose that, after a good faith attempt, that is when Alan Wilson said, these issues cannot be remedied. I will take the case now. And he did so. He's done his job. And now the Speaker has got his hit squad, not only after me, which they've been doing for 6 years, but also after Alan Wilson. Anonymous bloggers saying horrible things. And not just about us, but about grassroots activists who are volunteers. And I am pretty certain that the powerful legislative leadership is behind this. So I want you to remember something. You stand up to this government, this is what they do to you. This is our government running active smear campaigns. And they're bad. None of it's true. I can't repeat some of it. But I can tell you the other day, I read a post that defamed my dead father. That's right. That's your leadership. That man has more power than any other American politician. More unchecked power over the judges, over the executive branch, over the budget. How do we fight him? We're doing our best. But I will tell you that you all have to stay on this. I need you to care. And you need to let your House members know that you do care. That this man is still holding all the power. Get involved with this, folks. It's important. And you know, guys like Rick Driver, I know you get attacked, Rick. I know they come after you. I know what they do because you stand up to them. We don't attack these people personally, but they have no rules. So, if they succeed in shutting us down, who do you think is going to take them on? Who's going to challenge them? Because that's what they're banking on, that they can shut us down and squeeze off our support, which they've worked out pretty hard, shut Rick down, shut these grassroots leaders down. They focused on us. If they win, you're not going to have any other champions for a long time. So I'd ask you to consider that very hard, to consider joining the effort We need you. We need you. We very much do. We cannot keep fighting these guys by ourselves. We need you to support us in multiple ways, and I'm going to ask you to do that. Support the Policy Council. Please, however you can, with whatever you can, and get engaged and let them hear your voice beyond elections. And I thank you all. You're doing a good job of keeping things real, and no one has a lot to do with that, guys. So, all right, thank you.